It was just past 1415, or 2:15 in the afternoon. When she walked in, the doors to the simulator bay slid open with a quiet hiss, letting in a draft of hot Texas air that was quickly swallowed by the chilled, recycled atmosphere inside. The lights in the bay were bright but clinical, casting long shadows between rows of server towers and flight control stations. The scent of electronics, old coffee, and antiseptic hung in the air like part of the infrastructure itself. No one looked up at first. A few of the younger officer candidates glanced her way and then dismissed her with that unconscious arrogance of people too focused on proving themselves. She wore a plain olive drab flight suit, no name patch, no rank, no squadron insignia, no unit tape, the kind of suit that usually belonged to maintenance techs or civilian contractors, the quiet support crew no one paid attention to. She didn't move like a contractor, though. She moved with intention, not fast, not slow, just measured, each step deliberate, as if she knew exactly where she wanted to be. She paused near the main instructor's console, a position that offered a clear view of the primary simulator screen and the control matrix behind it. Her hands stayed loose at her sides. She didn't touch anything. Technical Sergeant Ryan Cole spotted her a few seconds later. He was leaning over the shoulder of a trainee who was prepping for a systems check inside the T-6 Texan II cockpit mock-up. Cole had 20 years in uniform. Most of them spent training hotshot lieutenants who thought they knew everything after 10 hours of flight time. He didn't like surprises. He liked order. He especially didn't like strangers near his gear. His eyes narrowed. He kept watching her. She wasn't fidgeting, wasn't lost, wasn't taking notes or acting like she didn't belong. She was just observing, calmly, like she was waiting for something, or maybe like she already knew what was going to happen. Cole shifted his weight and stepped away from the student, his boots echoing softly on the polished floor. He didn't say anything yet. Not at first. He just watched her, trying to decide if she was a lost civilian or one of those quiet specialists from base ops who showed up when something broke and left without a word. But she had no badge, no laptop, no clipboard, just that flight suit, slightly faded at the seams, and eyes that didn't miss anything. The room hummed with quiet tension. Screens blinked. Voices murmured. A few instructors shared low jokes near the coffee station, but none of that touched her. She stood like a ghost in a place built for noise and movement, and the stillness around her was almost uncomfortable. Cole finally stepped closer, not quite in her space, but near enough to remind her this was his domain. She didn't flinch, didn't even look at him. Her eyes were on the stream of telemetry coming from the simulator, lines of code, numbers, diagnostics. It was the kind of data most instructors barely glanced at. She was reading it like a story. Cole's jaw tightened. He said nothing, but his posture hardened. The others hadn't noticed yet, too busy with their tasks. But Cole had. He didn't recognize her, and that meant one of two things. Either she didn't belong, or she did, and that thought bothered him even more. He took another step forward, trying to read her, trying to provoke a reaction. Nothing. Her silence felt deliberate, not the silence of someone afraid to speak, but the kind that came from knowing she didn't need to, whatever she was, whoever she was. Cole didn't like being unsure, and this woman made him feel very unsure. Something about her presence didn't fit. She wasn't watching the simulation. She was studying it. And though she hadn't touched a single control, it felt like she was already in control of the room. Something was about to shift, but no one else seemed to realize it yet. The simulator came to life just after 1430, or 2:30 in the afternoon. Inside the sealed mock cockpit, Second, Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell gripped the controls of the T-6 Texan II trainer with steady hands that were already beginning to sweat. The emergency scenario had just begun, and the pressure in the bay grew quiet and dense like a storm building without sound. Outside the simpod, monitors flickered with streams of telemetry. Instructors leaned in. Sergeant Ryan Cole hovered behind the instructor console, arms crossed. Watching. The scenario should have been routine. Engine flameout. Limited time to glide to a safe runway. But something went wrong almost immediately. Warning lights that didn't belong to this script began to flash. A sudden on-set stale. A violent yow. Instruments began to contradict each other. Inside, Mitchell's voice came through the intercom, tight and sharp. She said the aircraft was pulling into an unrecoverable spin. Cole barked back without hesitation. Apply opposite rudder. Stick forward. Neutralize your aileron. You're panicking. Just follow procedure. But Mitchell wasn't panicking. Not yet. Her voice stayed clipped and focused. She was flying the checklist. Her feet were on the pedals. Her hands moved with muscle memory. Still, the simulator was not responding. The aircraft model began to spin on the screen in an unnatural way. Inputs weren't correcting the behavior. The telemetry started throwing red flags faster than anyone could process. The other instructors glanced at each other. This wasn't right. Something deeper was failing. Still, Cole kept going. He raised his voice, told her to stop fighting the aircraft and fly the recovery. He leaned over to initiate an override, but found the secondary console partially blocked. The woman in the olive flight suit was still standing there, silent, watching, hands behind her back, eyes locked on the data feed. He didn't ask her to move, didn't pause. With a grunt of irritation and no warning, he shoved her aside. Not a bump, not a nudge. He lowered his shoulder and moved her like a piece of gear that didn't belong. Her body hit the edge of the server rack with a hollow metal clang. Head snapped toward the sound. She didn't speak, didn't gasp or recoil, just absorbed the impact, straightened her flight suit with a slow, methodical tug at the front zipper, and shifted one step to the side. Her gaze never left the screen. The room shifted. It wasn't loud. No one shouted. No one moved. But something cracked. Something that had been silent and steady for years. The instructors were still. The students watched with wide eyes. Mitchell's breathing came rapid now through the comms. Her voice rising. Altitude falling. Spin increasing. Nothing responding. Cole leaned over the console. Stabbed at the keys. Nothing worked. The override failed. He cursed under his breath and repeated commands that had stopped making sense. He was losing control of the sim, and he was losing the room. The woman remained quiet. Her presence was no longer passive. It was deliberate. Her silence didn't suggest confusion or fear. It was the silence of someone watching a predictable failure unfold. Cole finally looked at her. Really looked. And for the first time, something flickered in his face. Not anger. Not superiority. Uncertainty. Mitchell's voice broke in again. Sir. Request permission to eject. The room held its breath. Cole froze. And the woman waited. Still silent. Still watching. At the center of it all. No longer background. Now the storm was circling her. The alarms wouldn't stop. Inside the sealed cockpit of the T-6 Texan II simulator, Lieutenant Mitchell's voice came sharp over the intercom, layered with panic. She was in a flat spin. The aircraft was dropping fast. She said nothing was responding. Altitude readouts plummeted on the central monitor. Red and amber warnings blinked in clusters across the display. Spin rate increasing. Airspeed decaying. No thrust. It was now 14:33 in the afternoon, and the simulator was no longer simulating a standard emergency. This was a full cascade failure. The inputs were being ignored. The system wasn't just locked. It was broken. Sergeant Cole slammed his hand on the console. He barked instructions again. Reverse rudder. Neutral stick. Nose down. His voice was too loud, cutting across the room like a blade. But no one moved. No one spoke. Nothing he tried worked. His hands hovered above the override keys like they had minutes ago. Except now they were shaking. Mitchell cried out again. She couldn't regain control. Altitude now below 5,000 feet. In real life, She'd have already been ordered to eject. Cole stepped back, visibly rattled. He reached for the comms but didn't speak. For the first time, he looked lost. No command, no control, just helpless noise in a room full of silence. Then the woman moved. She didn't rush, didn't speak right away. She stepped forward from where she had been standing. Expression calm, posture firm. Everyone turned to her as if gravity had suddenly shifted. She said she had control. Cole turned, confused. He scoffed and waved her off. But no one else did. She walked straight to the secondary instructor's seat, the one beside Cole's. Her movements were smooth, practiced. She sat, adjusted the seat height with a quick lever pull, and leaned forward into the console. Her fingers began to move. They didn't tap random keys. She wasn't guessing. She was typing with purpose. Lines of code instead of commands. No one had ever seen those functions used before. She opened a small panel hidden beneath the edge of the console maintenance level. It wasn't in the instructor's handbook. She pulled back a latch, revealing a diagnostic port with a narrow row of physical toggles and 2 recessed switches. She began to rewrite the system. She bypassed the corrupted logic that had jammed the simulator, restored direct actuator control to the control surfaces, unhooked faulty virtual flight envelope limiters. She didn't talk while doing it. She didn't explain. The simulator display began to change. Some warnings blinked off. Others shifted from red to amber. The aircraft inside the simulation was still falling, but the spin was easing, rotation stabilizing, altitude 4,000 feet, no engine power, no simulated restart, dead stick. The woman leaned into the flight control overlay and took the instructor stick, not to fly the aircraft manually, but to input data in sync with the rewired system logic. Her left hand adjusted trim levels, while her right made micro inputs on pitch control. She wasn't watching the cockpit view. She was reading the telemetry angle of attack, sink rate, airspeed, lideratio. She wasn't flying the simulator. She was flying the numbers. At 3,000 feet, she traded pitch for airspeed, lowering the nose carefully, bringing the aircraft just above stall threshold. The spin broke completely. The T-6 inches. The simulation became a glider. There was a runway in view now, simulated, but real enough for everyone watching. The data stream on the right side of the screen flashed a new warning: landing solution impossible. Too far. Not enough lift. She ignored it. She held the glide path steady. Every movement was surgical. Every correction came half a second before anyone else might have thought to make it. 2,000 feet. Then 1,000. The digital horizon flattened. She brought the gear down. 500 feet. The simulated aircraft was descending fast but clean. The simulated wheels touched down. Not hard, not heavy. Just a soft thump. Perfectly centered. The room held its breath. The T-6 rolled to a stop. The display flashed green. Landed. No one moved. No one spoke. At 2:36 in the afternoon, the impossible had just happened. And the silent woman in the faded flight suit had done it like she'd done it 100 times before. Like it was routine. Like it was already over before it began. The simulator bay was silent. Every display still glowed. Every machine still hummed. But no one moved. The simulated T-6 had landed. That much was clear. But what had just happened wasn't supposed to be possible. Not at that altitude. Not without power. Not with a system failure that deep. And certainly not by someone no one even recognized. At 1:36 or 2:36 in the afternoon. Brigadier General Evelyn Ward stepped back from the instructor's console. She didn't look around. Didn't wait for a reaction. Her hands dropped to her sides. Her eyes lowered just slightly. She looked, for a moment, like someone who had just finished balancing a checkbook. Not someone who had just rewritten the rules of aviation training in front of a full room. Technical Sergeant Cole stood stiff near the server racks. still gripping the edge of the table. His knuckles were white. His mouth was slightly open. He hadn't spoken since the word landed had appeared on the screen. Now he just watched her, with a gaze caught somewhere between disbelief and dread. The others were beginning to whisper. The young officers, the instructors. No one said her name. No one knew it. But they were no longer wondering who she was. They were wondering what she was. Lieutenant Colonel Henderson had been watching from the rear of the bay, arms crossed, one eyebrow raised just slightly. He didn't speak either. Not at first. Then, slowly, he turned and walked to the hardened terminal in the corner. The one that connected to secure personnel records. It took his key card, then a passcode, then a fingerprint scan. The screen flickered and loaded. His face changed. The line of his mouth tightened. He stepped back, paused, then walked back into the center of the bay with a slow, deliberate pace. His voice broke the silence. Attention to detail matters. Rank, flight time, combat hours, system access. He listed them one by one, as if reading from a ceremonial citation. Her name. Finally, clear and final. Brigadier General Evelyn Ward. Call sign Ghost. 8,231 flight hours. 3 combat deployments. Lead pilot in Operation Iron Reach, where she coordinated a defensive flight path that saved an entire transport squadron during an ambush in the Konar River Valley. Recipient of the Silver Star. Distinguished Flying Cross. Air Medal with 2 clusters. He paused. Let the weight settle. She served as Principal Systems Advisor for the Air Force's Tactical Training Initiative. She helped design this very simulator. She didn't override anything. She accessed her own code. The bay remained still. Then, the final words. As of 0600 this morning, she is your new commanding officer, 33rd Training Wing. One by one, the trainees snapped to attention. Then the instructors. Chair scraped. Hands flew to brows. Every movement sharp and formal. The room locked into place. Except for Cole. He stayed where he was, unable to move. Eyes still on her. His face pale. Not just with embarrassment, but something deeper. The slow, creeping realization that he had shoved a general. He had shoved a war hero. He had shoved the very architect of the simulator he claimed to command. Evelyn didn't look at him. Not out of cruelty. Just purpose. She turned slowly, stepped once away from the console, and clasped her hands behind her back. Not in triumph. Not in authority. Just peace. The silence returned. But this time, it carried weight. Reverence. The kind that doesn't ask for recognition because it already has it. Unspoken. Undeniable. Ghost wasn't a legend anymore. She was real. And she had just landed in the heart of their world. The meeting wasn't on the schedule. No one announced it. Technical Sergeant Ryan Cole had submitted the request quietly through the chain of command, not expecting it to be approved. It had been 3 weeks since the incident in the simulator bay, 3 weeks since he'd been reassigned to logistics support, 3 weeks since he'd had to look his own pride in the mirror and see what it really cost. At 0905, or 9:05 in the morning, he was called into a small, windowless office near the command wing. Brigadier General Evelyn Ward was already there. She stood by the desk, arms relaxed at her sides. She didn't offer a seat, didn't smile, just waited. Cole stood at attention and spoke clearly. He offered no excuses. He acknowledged the disrespect. He owned the failure. His voice cracked once, but he didn't waver. He had spent his entire career believing he knew what right looked like. That day had proved him wrong. Ward listened without interrupting. When he finished, she gave a single nod. Her response was measured. She told him the truth, that when his knowledge failed, he fell back on ego instead of flexibility, that he relied on rank and volume when what was needed was insight. That leadership meant seeing the whole person in front of you, not just their uniform or the way they spoke. She didn't ask for anything in return. She didn't offer forgiveness. What she gave him was harder. A challenge. Learn from it. Teach differently. See people differently. Months passed. Slowly. Steadily. Cole was given clearance to return to the simulator wing. He came back, changed. Gone was the loud confidence. Gone was the bite. He still demanded excellence. But now, he explained why. He coached. He corrected without humiliation. He pushed students harder. But he lifted them. Too, he had a sharp eye for the quiet ones, the ones who hesitated, the ones who listened more than they talked. He saw in them the potential he had once overlooked, and he made sure no one else missed it either. A brass plaque was quietly installed next to the instructor console. It didn't have a date or a rank, just a name. General Ward, the ghost in the system, and right beneath it, etched in the same metal, the name of the most difficult sim module in the entire flight program, the Ward maneuver, a dead-stick glide from under 3,000 feet, no thrust, no autopilot, all instinct. One afternoon, just before 3 o'clock, he stood beside the console as a young cadet struggled through the maneuver. She was smart, but nervous. Her voice trembled. Her inputs wobbled. She was about to hit eject. Cole leaned forward and spoke into the mic. His voice was calm, simple, steady. He told her to breathe, to fly the numbers, not the fear. He reminded her that competence didn't always shout. She made the corrections. The spin broke. The glide held. The wheels touched down. The screen blinked green. Landed. Cole smiled. Just a little. He looked up at the plaque and whispered under his breath, "The ghost would be proud,